You are now listening to the Yeshua community. The book of Revelation is often read as a map of the end times, but when we place it in its proper historical setting, its meaning changes completely. Revelation is not a prediction of our future. It is a spiritual interpretation of John's own present. It is a protest against Roman power and a declaration that the empire is already judged by God. The book was written in the 90s AD, during the reign of Emperor Domitian. Rome was wealthy, oppressive, militarily dominant, and demanding absolute loyalty. But from John's perspective as a Jewish follower of Jesus, Rome was not glorious. It was a beast, a corrupt system, and a city built on exploitation. His message was written for small communities in Asia Minor who were struggling under the weight of the imperial cult. Refusing to honor the emperor could cost you your work, your social standing, or even your life. John expected his book to circulate in this region. It was addressed to 7 congregations along a well-known Roman mail route in Asia Minor, and these congregations served as distribution points. He likely assumed the book would be copied and passed from one city to the next, from Ephesus to Smyrna, from Smyrna to Pergamum and onward. But there is no reason to think he imagined the text would ever travel beyond this part of the world. At the time, the Jesus movement was tiny, fragmented, and socially vulnerable. John was not writing for the world. He was writing for a handful of diaspora communities under imperial pressure. That his book would one day become one of the most famous and debated works in human history is almost certainly a development he never foresaw. This also reveals something important. Revelation was not written for us in modern times. John never explains who the Nicolaitans were, or who Jezebel in Thyatira was, or why Pergamum was where Satan lives. These were local groups and local conflicts that his original readers recognized immediately. The fact that we do not know who the Nicolaitans were is strong evidence that the book assumed first-century knowledge and first-century situations. John wrote to real people facing real tensions in their own congregations, not to a distant future that could not possibly understand these references. This supports the simplest and most historically credible reading. The book must be interpreted first and foremost in its original context. This background also points toward a wider principle. The simplest way to understand Revelation is the most historically grounded one. We do not need speculative timelines, hidden codes, or futuristic predictions. The book should be read in the same world in which it was written. The audience was local, the political situation was specific, and the symbols reflected realities that the first readers knew intimately. The beast must be Rome, because Rome was the only empire with the reach and power the text describes. Babylon must be Rome, because Rome was universally known as the city on 7 hills. The number 666 must refer to Nero, because that was the only name that fit the numerical system John uses, and because the Nero Redivivus myth was alive in Asia Minor. And when John says soon, it must have meant something meaningful to the people of the first century, not a prediction for an unimaginable future. When we strip away later assumptions and take the text on its own terms, the book becomes straightforward. John is interpreting the spiritual meaning of the world he lived in. Into his own time, John proclaims something radical. Rome is already under God's judgment, even though it appears powerful. This is the key to understanding Revelation. It is not a forecast. It is an unveiling of the spiritual reality behind the political surface. What most people regarded as the greatest empire on earth, John describes as a condemned power whose fall has already been decided in heaven. This is also why John can speak about things happening soon. In Jewish apocalyptic language, soon does not mean within a few years. It means that God has already begun to act. The judgment is active now. The outcome is certain. When God intervenes, he acts quickly, even if history takes centuries to catch up. With this perspective, the symbols fall naturally into place. The beast from the sea represents Rome's political and military power, active in John's own time. The beast from the earth represents the imperial cult, the network of priests, astrologers, administrators, and enforcers who made emperor worship a social obligation. The number 666 refers to Nero, whose death in the year 68 was followed by widespread rumors that he would return. Many in Asia Minor believed that Nero's tyranny had been revived in Emperor Domitian, who was often called Nero Reborn. This is the meaning of the deadly wound that was healed. Imperial evil collapsed under Nero and rose again in Domitian. The great harlot, named Babylon, is Rome itself, the city on 7 hills, clothed in luxury and built on exploitation. John borrows imagery from the prophets who once condemned ancient empires like Babylon, Tyre, and Nineveh, and applies it directly to Rome. When he cries, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon," he does not mean that Rome has literally fallen. He means that the moral verdict is already delivered. Its fall is a divine fact before it becomes a historical one. This also helps us understand the list in Revelation 21:8, which mentions the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, murderers, sorcerers, the sexually immoral, and all liars. This is not a list of private moral failings. In John's world, these terms described the social groups that upheld the Roman system. The cowardly were those who refused to stand with the persecuted and chose safety over truth. The unbelieving were those who placed their trust in the emperor rather than in God, believing Rome was the true master of the world. Murderers and sorcerers referred to soldiers, torturers, astrologers, and cult officials who maintained imperial power. The sexually immoral referred to those involved in ritualized exploitation and political depravity linked to emperor worship. And the liars were the propagandists, heralds, astrologers, and court historians who produced falsehoods to strengthen the emperor's image. In other words, this is a judgment on collaborators, enforcers, and abusers within the Roman system. John is not condemning ordinary human weakness. He is condemning the machinery of oppression. Seen in this way, Revelation becomes a deeply human document. It is the voice of a marginalized community saying that no empire, however powerful, defines the truth of the world. It insists that coercion, propaganda, and injustice are not signs of strength but symptoms of a doomed system. It comforts the oppressed by reminding them that God's kingdom is already present, even if hidden, and that Rome's apparent strength is a deception. In God's eyes, the empire is already fallen. Revelation is not a roadmap for the distant future. It is a protest against a present empire. It is a vision of hidden justice unfolding in the here and now. And it is a reminder that every empire built on violence carries within itself the seeds of its own destruction. Seen from John's perspective, the world is not waiting for judgment. Judgment is already here. And God's kingdom is already real. If Revelation was written for 7 congregations in Asia Minor and not for us, is there any reason to read it today? Surprisingly, the answer is yes. The book still carries value, not as a prediction of our future, but as a witness to how real people interpreted their world through faith and imagination. First, Revelation has immense historical value. It provides a rare and vivid look into the lives of small, vulnerable communities living under the shadow of Roman power. It shows us how ordinary people experienced the empire, how the imperial cult pressed upon daily life, and how early believers understood persecution, loyalty, and hope. As a document from the 1st century, Revelation is unmatched. Second, the book illustrates how humans think and speak in moments of crisis. It portrays the emotional world of communities facing fear, marginalization, and political pressure. The language of beasts, dragons, and visions is not escapism, it is the vocabulary of survival. Revelation shows us how oppressed groups use imagery to condemn injustice and rally courage. That psychological and sociological insight remains relevant. Third, Revelation exposes the nature of political power. By depicting Rome as a beast and Babylon as a corrupt woman clothed in luxury, the book unmasks imperial violence and exploitation. These symbols are tied to the past, but the underlying insight remains universal. Power that relies on force, deception, and domination is ultimately self-destructive. Revelation teaches us how people of faith and conscience have historically unmasked oppressive systems long before they collapsed. Fourth, the book is essential for understanding early Christianity. Without Revelation, we would not fully grasp why early Christians were sometimes viewed as politically dangerous, why martyrdom became central, or how apocalyptic expectation shaped the identity of the first generations. Revelation is not marginal, it is a key piece of the religious landscape of the ancient world. Fifth, the book reminds us why historical reading matters. Revelation is an ideal example of why context must guide interpretation. It shows how easily a text can be misunderstood when removed from its time and culture. Reading it historically protects us from harmful speculation and helps us develop a disciplined, responsible approach to sacred literature. Finally, even though its symbols belong to another age, its moral message still speaks. Stand firm, resist injustice, do not yield to corrupt power, and trust that truth outlasts every empire. This is not a prediction of the future, but a call to integrity in the present. Revelation was not written for us, but it can still teach us about history, about hope, and about the enduring struggle to remain faithful in a world shaped by competing powers. Thank you for listening. If this reflection resonated with you, consider liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. May peace surround you, and may kindness guide your path forward.